because I knew I sinned constantly. I knew that God would hold me accountable someday. We teach the Bible to our kids every day, but we're also hypocrites every day. They see the hypocrisy in us, and I think there's just as much of a risk of denying God and his reality by seeing like a false form of faith. I explained to them that the core reason why we stay together is that because our commitment in our marriage is to God. It's not actually primarily to each other. It's to God.
But I was just attacked left and right for being a Christian. And I remember going back to my apartment and just thinking about stuff and really having almost a crisis of faith. Dr. Bucher, thank you so much for coming on. We are going to get straight into it. Can you start by sharing how you came to faith in Christ?
Yeah. Thanks for getting together to hang out and have a conversation. I was brought up in a strong Christian family. My parents, I think my dad was saved late in high school, and my mom came from a family where her dad was saved kind of halfway through adulthood. He had been flying airplanes and got a heart condition, and then basically gave his life over to the Lord after that and became a pastor. So she came from a very strong background. And so both my parents, I think were huge, solid, believers. And so at a young age, probably 5, I made a profession of faith. And, I don't know that I remember that moment per se, but I remember having like a confidence after that I was a part of God's family because, I felt an impending like judgment was headed for me because I knew I sinned constantly. And of course still do, but I knew that God would hold me accountable someday. And so I feared for that, but I knew because of what my parents had shared to me from the Bible that Jesus came, lived a perfect life, paid the punishment, the debt that I could never pay. And it's nothing that I had to do to earn it, thankfully, because I have nothing I can bring. And it's just a gift. And to be given that gift and to just be able to believe and know and have a purpose and just joy in life because of that is all that's worth living for. And so after that, I don't know, I was kind of a strong-willed kid, and my parents, I bumped head with my parents, a bit, but, getting on to my teenage years, I had a few moments of doubting my faith and such, but always felt strongly that God was preserving me in my salvation. He's not going to, as John 6 says, all the Father has given me are mine, and just continued to have my faith strengthened. We went to a couple good churches, and really the church I go to now, I've been going there since I was in the latter part of my teenage years, and just the teaching from Scripture is so clear and unadulterated. And I've had times where I've been able to get counseling from the leaders, the pastors there, and just been blessed that even though, again, like I mentioned earlier, like I still struggle with sin. It's a daily battle. I feel so overwhelmed at times, grateful that God has given me a salvation for an eternal life, and to have a family of believers around me at my church and my immediate family that continues to strengthen and encourage me in that way. It's it's hard to describe.
So you grew up in Olathe?
Yeah, my parents have lived there south of Olathe. We got a place back out there when it was like cornfields and stuff. And grew up kind of feeling like I was out in the country. It was kind of cool. And then as I was kind of getting ready to move out and stuff, the cul-de-sacs kind of came in and take over.
What high school?
Well, I would have gone to Olathe South, but I was homeschooled.
Wow.
Yeah.
We just started that last year with our daughter.
Yes.
At 6th grade, now she's 7th, but
yeah.
So dive a little deeper into that experience.
Well, oh man, I love the concept of homeschooling. Now, it'd be unfair for me to say I love homeschooling because my wife does almost all of it. Okay. So
that's what we can say. We love it because we don't have to do it.
I mean, I am there to support, but she is just kind of like my mom was, a master of kind of gathering information about what curriculums are available. She talks with other homeschool families and find out what have you guys used that's worked, and because you got different kids with different acuities, and try to figure out, what would be best for them. That's kind of the power of homeschooling is not just the ability to kind of be together, but from an academic level to say, okay, this kid is really good at this, so I can kind of push them forward there, but they struggle in this, so I'm going to kind of spend some time working with them and maybe get them caught up or maybe not. And
more individualized.
It's very individualized. And I know there's that capability in traditional schools too, but I was blessed because my mom had a master's degree in education. So like there was nothing left out. And I don't know what anyone else's experience was. That's just the experience I had, but I'm super grateful that she, was rigorous and made us do everything. I think it can be easy, honestly, in the homeschool setting to be like, oh, yeah, we might get that. We might get that done. So you have to have, some self-accountability there to make sure that, we're educating well. And of course, there's the opportunity as you're together to impart spiritual truth, biblical truth. You have, whether you use a curriculum or you just spend time together in God's word, that's really, a huge bonus that you can hand so many things down. I think it's, I can't remember where it is in the Old Testament, but it talks about just the fact of just like talking about it when you wake up, talking about it in the daytime, talking about it when you go to bed, and just like handing it off to the next generation is so essential. Like, I found a copy of our church's doctrinal statement recently. And so like a week ago, I handed it to my 13-year-old son and I said, why don't you read through this and just underline anything that you're like, not sure I understand that 100%. And of course, the doctrinal statement has got probably hundreds of scripture references attached to it too. And so he went through that, and then, he underlined a few sections. I don't know how deeply he thought about it, but he's good at asking questions. So I think he probably was trying to do good when he was reading through it. And so it's just a cool opportunity to say, hey, what does election mean? What is it that caused us to now have this version of the Bible that we have? So I don't know. That was a cool interaction that I had recently with him. And
how many kids?
We have 4.
What ages?
My oldest is 16. She's a daughter that's 16, and then son's 13, and then 2 more girls. I got one that she's going to be 11. Right. Yeah, I think she's going to be 11.
You got 4 kids. You get a pass
next Saturday, and then another girl that's 9. So yeah, my wife.
Your wife is busy.
She homeschools all of them.
Oh my goodness.
The oldest one has taken, a college course now, math course. So I'm trying to help out with that a little bit. My mom at one point did kind of lose the ability to carry me through with math. And so I started taking some classes at JUCO. So we're kind of doing the same thing. I mean, it's been really cool. When you're a younger person, you're like, why do my parents do things this way? But now I find myself in like, wow, this is what my parents did. It makes a lot of sense.
Isn't that funny how that works? So why did you guys end up following in your parents' footsteps in homeschooling?
Well, to tell the full story, my wife is homeschooled too. So, it kind of was one of those things where it's like...
But you still had to make a decision, and this is the best for our kids, so then why?
I don't want to... We'd seen several friends have, decent experiences with their kids in traditional school settings. And so I wouldn't say we were like afraid of that or anything like that. I think it can sometimes be a mistake to say like, oh, I never let my kid go to school, or so many bad influences. It's like, well, I mean, I don't know what's worse. If you're in an environment where it's mostly anti-God, or you're in an environment where we teach the Bible to our kids every day, but we're also hypocrites every day.
Yeah.
Like they see, probably because we spend more time together than maybe parents and kids who have their kids in traditional school, they see the hypocrisy in us. And I think, there's just as much of a risk of denying God and his reality by seeing like a false form of faith. I don't know, maybe false form isn't the right term, but like a poor example. And so we run that risk, but we were both homeschooled. So it was like, yeah, this is what we're going to do. Like it works.
Well, we weren't, and I wasn't.
Yeah,
for sure. And the reason why we decided was just we didn't want the world raising our daughter. Mm-hmm. And I think it also will go back to the individual. Everybody's different. Yeah. Everybody can either be a little bit more sensitive, not as much. I mean, I've taught thousands of kids. They're all so different. Yeah. And some of them, they'd be fine in public school because they're just already very independent. Exactly. They don't get influenced. Exactly. But if you feel like your child is going to get influenced, then I would say maybe homeschool. Mm-hmm. But also, just like you said with you understanding what your parents did back then, now, that also, I think, applies to our children, because during that phase of life is when they're so malleable. It's like that's when they can really get shaped.
Yes.
And also that's where their foundation is. Because I don't know if you had the same experience as me, but going to college, that's where my faith was really tested.
Okay.
Philosophy.
Okay.
Taking philosophy. I took two of them. I loved the class.
Yeah.
But I was just attacked left and right for being a Christian. Mm. And I remember going back to my apartment and just thinking about stuff and really having almost a crisis of faith. Sure. But I'm also thinking, well, is it because I wasn't raised in the Word? And being able to have that foundational element where if somebody does challenge it, I'm already ready for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think every year the decision to continue homeschooling, and that's kind of what especially for people who don't maybe have experience with it, I tend to say, well, every year we have to redecide. Yeah. And I'd say, I totally agree with what you said in regards to, I have some kids who I would have, really not much of a hesitation having them in a different type of school setting. And, some kids who I'm like, I'd really love to keep this one more in our bubble, just because I can tell by the personality. And, when I got out of high school, I was, as oldest in my family. I think my parents were feeling a little like shelterish of me. And so they were dead set on me going to a Christian school, a conservative Christian school. So I visited a couple, and then I ended up at Cedarville University. And
where is that?
It's out in Ohio. And I thought of this because you were just telling your story about school, but there was a really neat philosophy teacher there, and he was teaching us a type of a Christian mindset of kind of going through some of the old philosophical, Aristotle, and I can tell my memory's faded, but going through some of the old, foundations of philosophical mindsets and asking, well, like, why does that align with God's word or not align with God's word? And so that was really helpful for me. I guess I would say, I was kind of lifted up at that point instead of being challenged. And then I only stayed there a year. And then I ended up at K-State.
That's a big change.
Yeah. Well,
why'd you do that?
Well, it's a funny story. Like, first of all, it's expensive out there at a private Christian school. And
did you have to pay for it?
I paid a little bit. I was saving up money through high school, and I think my dad was probably putting some money into, some form of some savings account. Yeah. I kind of worked at his office a little bit, and I think he overpaid me. So, one of those kind of things. And so, some of that was mine and some of it was really his, but I contributed a big chunk that first year. And, but what happened was I had been blessed to kind of get a lot of credits from JUCO in high school. So I already had like a freshman year done. So when they put me in an upperclassman dorm when I went to school that first year, and so I made friends with some guys, but then I realized they were about to graduate. So I kind of sensed like, oh man, I'm gonna have to go and make all new friends next year. And then I had this funny incident where, on a college campus, sometimes you have pranks and stuff like that. Well, we decided, I shouldn't say we, I want to feel like I was just kind of the younger guy here, but the guys decided that we would go and throw eggs at the kind of nerdy campus security guy, like just, it's kind of a jerky thing now that I think about it. But we thought it would just be a funny prank, and then, we'd go help him clean up afterwards or something like that, and or at their vehicle, not at him personally. Yeah. Well, then this vehicle comes around the corner and we start chucking eggs at it, and it's a cop. And so that's, I don't know, a misdemeanor or something. You can't throw stuff at a cop car. So,
assault.
Yeah, something bad. So we all took off running, and I wasn't caught, but some others were, and they had to, get an attorney and do things like that. And so I told my parents that story. I was like, yeah, it's not as conservative here as you think. And so I ended up going to K-State because there was going to be a house full of guys that I knew from high school who were going to be living together. And, my parents kind of acquiesced to that. And I wanted to be closer to home too. And, my wife at that time, we were very close, but over the phone. And I was kind of desiring to be closer to her too. And
how'd you meet her?
We met doing Bible quizzing. And
what age?
I mean, I think the first time I ever saw or met her, I was probably like 11 or something. Yeah, because like I said, we were both in the homeschool circles.
Oh, wow.
I think we were in like a homeschool theatrical play or something together. But then we started Bible quizzing together maybe when we were 16 or something like that. And
when did you guys start dating?
my parents had kind of strong feelings about not doing traditional dating.
Yes.
Which I'm grateful for. They were kind of more, the courtship type of approach, whatever you want. And that can mean a lot of things. But it was good because we ended up being kind of in and out of relationship for, like 7 years. So I can imagine that if we'd kind of gone hard and heavy from the beginning, it would have been very difficult to, maintain at least some level of purity in our relationship and save ourselves for marriage and those sort of things. So I'm grateful that they kind of, pushed us to keep things at a group friend level while I was in high school. And then once I was in college, then I was making phone calls to her and stuff, and I would visit her, come back in town and visit her, occasionally. And so we are kind of opposites, and I don't know if that's what attracted us to each other, but I always just found her to be someone who's kind of easy to read. So I kind of feel like I know what she's thinking most of the time. And I was, just grateful to have somebody who's open, about how they're feeling. And, I know if things aren't right between us, and I know we need to do something about it. So yeah, we've been together almost 20, it'll be 20 years in August.
Wow.
So yeah, very blessed.
That's the way to do it. I mean, obviously that's completely opposite of what the world tells you today. To court is ridiculous to the world. To wait until marriage is ridiculous. But if you think about it, however many years ago, that was normal. But now it's normal to do the opposite, where it's like play marriage, even though you're not married, and then see if it works. It's like you test it out. Yeah. But unfortunately, you're not following God's design, in my opinion.
Yeah, I feel like I've been able to learn, over 20 years of marriage, that it's not our attraction to each other that keeps us together. It's not our maturity and respect at a human level for one another that keeps us together. It's just God. Yeah. Because we are opposites. We can butt heads frequently, have miscommunications, communication failures frequently. And so we're constantly working on that. And ultimately it's my responsibility. Like I'm responsible as the head of our household before God to maintain, our relationship. I've told our kids this, because occasionally, they've seen us not be at peace with one another, and they know other, families that are outwardly their marriage is struggling or falling apart, and so they ask questions like, "Are you and mom going to get divorced?" It's like, well, we're just having a disagreement. It's okay. We're going to have some disagreements, and I explained to them that the core reason why we stay together is that because our commitment in our marriage is to God. It's not actually primarily to each other. It's to God. And so, and of course there's so much scripture to back that up, and what God's brought together, we're not going to separate.
Think about when you get married, each of you place your hand on the Bible. And if you think about it, that should always be there. It's like you're gripping onto the Bible, each one of you, and that's the only link that's going to keep you together.
Sure.
Right? Because if you don't have that, then, for example, what is truth?
Yeah.
Like, who's the head? Who has what responsibility? What is the main job of the husband? Well, it's to love the wife like
sacrificially.
Christ. Right. Like Christ did the church. And then for the wife to respect the husband. It's really simple, right? But if you don't have scripture and then you listen to the world, you can get all different types of messaging, which then causes a lot of confusion. And unfortunately is what we see today, with 50% of marriages end in divorce. And it's all for really the kids, right? We get married so we can procreate. And we see the consequences of kids who don't have that unit, that strong unit. But it's funny you mentioned that, because my wife and I are actually very similar. She always jokes like we're almost identical, personality-wise.
Yeah? How's that work out?
The same as like you just said. Lots of yelling. But it's funny because my daughter will mention, he was arguing, and we're always like, no, we're just talking.
Yes, I know. We've said the same thing.
This is how we talk to each other. But I think what's most important is how fast you can get over it.
Oh, yeah.
And not going to bed angry. And like you said, especially for the husband, happy wife, happy life, right? Like you sense it. When things aren't how it's supposed to be. Yeah. It's our job to get it figured out. Yeah. And to apologize as fast as possible.
Yeah, there's so much humility required because, I don't know, I think I'm right all the time, basically. And, my wife would say the same thing too about me, but she's a much more, meek and humble, she would have like a kind of downward look on herself, like, I'm always doing things wrong. No, you're always doing things really well. And so it's difficult because I come across as like, well, I always do everything right. And, so that it kind of makes us rub each other a little bit sometimes. And I don't know, she's always been good. I have to be grateful for this, to call me out, on the times. And, that doesn't always go that well. If I'm calling her out or she's calling me out. But I've been always grateful. She always, keeps kind of like, did you apologize to the kids too? Because they heard you say that. It wasn't just me. And it unfortunately, has to happen.
The hardest part for me is to not get defensive automatically.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's so hard because this is how it always happens for me. She'll bring something up. I go, you're wrong. And then either later that day or the next day, I go, you're right. And I apologize. And then it actually changes my behavior. But in reality, what should happen is I go, you're right. And I change my behavior right then and there. That's the flesh. Yeah. That's the hardest part. And it's like what Paul says. It's like, I do the things I don't want to do, don't do the things I need to do, right? That's just like the daily battle of a husband who's trying to follow Christ. Do you have a verse that's anchored you, like during difficult times in your life or career?
I don't know. I'm not really a one verse guy, to be frank.
I'll start with mine.
Okay, go for it.
Mark 8:38, for whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will also be ashamed of him when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. This one is so impactful for me because even with our business back in 2020, we set our purpose statement to honor God, reflect Christ. So people will see that, right, as soon as they walk in. And we've actually had recently people who've decided to not do business with us because of that.
Yeah.
And this verse is just a great reminder for me that I should be focusing on the one and only person that actually matters, which is Christ, on who I'm being ashamed of or not, right? Because the reason why I think a lot of people are feeling like they can't share Christ is because they feel embarrassed.
Yeah.
But in reality, I'd rather feel embarrassed in front of humans than with Christ.
Yeah. Well, the latter part of that verse reminds me of a verse that's meant a lot to me over the last, 5 to 8 years. I went through kind of a study on my own through, I guess it was Ezekiel, Daniel, what's that other Old Testament prophet? It'll come to me in a second. And then Revelation. So kind of a eschatological study. And kind of listened to a lot of messages from John MacArthur and others. And wow, it just really made me have more forward thinking. And that's not really, that could be a term that you could really take out of context. But the verse that comes to mind, man, I don't even know if I can remember the reference, but it's where it says that the kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our Lord and his Christ. And so this is all going away. And to be looking forward to what's going to happen later. And I've tried to impart kind of some teaching of eschatology to my kids, not like that they need to have it memorized or something, but like, here's what's coming. God has graciously designed his plan of our universe to kind of meet every almost subtype that honestly people are somewhat demanding out of a God. There's like, well, why is everything so difficult? Why are there so many evil things in this world? Well, that's how God made the world to begin with. He made a perfect world. And then sin, we as humans came and sinned, and now it's just getting worse and worse. That's why there was the flood in the beginning, and now it gets worse and worse. And then there'll be, and of course it depends on your viewpoints of interpretation of Revelation and such, but 1,000-year reign with Christ on the earth, not everyone will be perfect, but it's going to be probably what everyone thinks kind of should be now. Like, hey, really good, strong authority, mostly good happening is kind of how I picture it. And then we have a new heaven and a new earth after that, eternity. And so, I don't know, just to be able to look forward to the promise that as being a member of God's family, that, we'll be with him in paradise. I think it's a waste of time or a shallow effort on the part of a true believer to just think of it as like, oh, I'll be walking down the streets of gold. That's there's so much more.
Yes.
And of course, so much of it is still hidden. Like the people in the Old Testament, their concept of what Jesus would be, the Messiah would be, they just had a shadow of it, And now that we've seen Jesus come, live a perfect life, die for our sins, come back to life, we have much more of the picture, but more to come because of his second coming. So, man, there's so much depth, we'll never reach the end of it, having finite minds and all, but.
So why did you decide to become a dentist?
Well, I did well in math and science in high school and college, and I started to kind of say, okay, well, I'm either going to do medicine or dentistry or research. And research kind of started to sound boring. I'm not much of a writer. I knew I'd have to write, reports and stuff like that. And so I was trying to decide between medicine and dentistry, and I called up my cousin, and he's a heart specialist. And he was like, I don't know if he was probably over 30, and he was still finishing his fellowship.
Yeah.
I don't know if that timing's exactly right there, but
yeah.
I was like, whoa. At that time I was like 21 or something. I was like, that's a long road. And I saw the attempt, I say attempt because now I'm trying to live it, but the attempt at balance that my dad was able to live out, being so involved with us and our activities and running a business. You can't really say, I pick my schedule. No, that's not really true. I mean, I set a schedule over the long run. And I can kind of squeeze it here or there, but just some flexibility, some opportunity to be, it's not like I can work from home that much, but I do some business things at home just on my computer or my phone. I just felt like that was what I was looking for. My dad, by the time he was, I think in his mid 40s, he had reduced his clinical, like strictly scheduled days to 3 days a week. And I was like, man, that's a great goal, And so, that's kind of what I was gearing towards. And, I'm not sure that I was one of those people who's like, I just want to help people with their teeth. It wasn't honestly motivated that way. It was just kind of like, I guess God's gifted me in these areas, and I like what my dad has done, and might as well do that. So
we're similar because my father did what I do now.
Yeah.
Yeah. He taught me. Yeah.
Awesome.
It's, which actually goes into my next question. How was it? I mean, after you graduated college, did you go straight to work for your father?
Well, you have undergrad, and then you have 4 years of dental school. And, I think I was talking about before we were, recording that, God is just he's dropped so many things in my lap. And one of those things was, the gift of having a practice available to start with right out of school. Now, like I said, my dad was only doing a 3-day-a-week practice at that point. So he couldn't really hire me. There wouldn't have been enough work for both of us. But there was another guy who was renting space from him. And he had been 3 days a week and had dropped down to 2 because he was aiming towards retirement. So he graciously, was talking to my dad, reached out and said, hey, let's talk about, can you just take over when you get out of school? Because I'm ready to be done. And so it was just perfect timing. And then, so I was doing that 2 days a week. And then this practice over in Leawood kind of shuttered. And I found out about it, and it was kind of a turnkey thing where it was like, just open it back up and call the patients and see if they'll still come there. And so I ran that practice 3 days a week for about 4 years, but actually only broke even. So made no profits there, but learned a lot of things. And by that time, the Olathe practice, my dad and I were kind of operating side by side, and my side had grown a little bit. And so I was able to do that alongside with moonlighting at a pediatric office next door. So I was able to sell off to break even that Leawood practice. And then my dad and I worked side by side, and he eventually wanted to slow down. So we started doing this transition plan that took about 5 years, where I kind of bought him out, and he slowed down. And then he told me, like a year before he was ready to retire, he's like, why don't you start looking? And that's when the very first person I talked to, another thing that God just gave to me, the very first person I talked to is now my partner. And it's been a blessing. We worked together for almost 2 years before we actually formed like a legal partnership, which was, it's been almost 2 years now.
Oh, pretty recent.
Yeah. So
when did you officially take over your father's practice?
I've got this picture. I think it was October 2018, because I got on this picture that says, I love my boss. And I asked him to wear it. So we took a picture because I like to kind of hold this over him a little bit. I never worked for him. Well, I did when I was a kid. Yeah. But he worked for me for a few years. But that's like the thing you want to do when you're kind of near the end of your career, be like, just clock in and clock out. Like, don't have to worry about all the, after hours business stuff. And
did you guys get along?
Yeah. He's so easy to get along with.
Wish that was the case with my father.
Man, credit to God. I mean, my dad did not grow up with a Christian father, a really, really good guy, very disciplined man, successful guy. But he's not a believer. And my dad, was saved through, I don't know, it's like some school or campus ministry when he was a teenager, late teens, and then got involved in some campus ministries at college and just kept diving into God's word. And, he so graciously just deferred to me many times early in my career. Of course, I always was asking him for advice on things too, but, he kind of let me take over some of the technology aspects within our practice. And, it's kind of, some of it was stuff like he just didn't want to bother to learn, but other stuff was like, hey, why don't you run with this and see where it goes? And man, he was so gracious. He's just literally just kind of handed a lot of things on a platter to me. So I've just been really blessed.
Do they teach you anything about business in school?
Almost nothing.
It's mind-boggling to me. And this is obviously with physicians in general, doctors in general, right? Go to med school, now go open your practice, and you have all of this other stuff that you didn't learn anything about, which is why I think a lot of them will get their MBA or whatever.
Yeah.
But you still need real life, teaching or knowledge on running a business. Because I remember when I first started, I went to business school. It's like so many things, especially with managing people.
That's the hardest.
Yes. Yeah. So how do you integrate your faith in the workplace?
I think my team had, they've been around me long enough, they know where I'm coming from. We are just blessed to have so many patients who are friends, long-term friends or family or come from my church. And so, man, we just have awesome conversations like in the clinical setting when they're there. So they kind of know what I'm about. Being that it's a small business and it's like you kind of almost spend more time with those people maybe than you do your family. So I don't know. We don't have like a motto per se, or like a, I don't know. I am not a strong like business professional organizational type. Kind of more just like we roll with it. So I can't say organizationally, it's more just that basically every single thing you do, every decision you make, for me, if it's not guided by trying to honor God and align with His word and His will, that's the only thing that guides me. Because over the years, I've had many opportunities with different team members to talk about things very personal, and they, graciously allow me to, share my faith and share my struggles. And, at times I've felt like, this is why we're here. Like to talk about this stuff, to talk about what really matters, to talk about, why is life so hard at times? And what does it mean to be able to trust in God? What does it mean even just to pray? Because that word's thrown around constantly. So like just in dentistry, I feel like we're constantly I feel like every single patient we see, I feel the weight of a morality of what I'm going to say to them, because I could exaggerate a need so easily. I mean, I could say, oh yeah, you need that filling, you need this crown, you need this, surgery or whatever. And I just try to make sure that I leave it in the hands of, the person. Say, hey, here's the information, you need to make your own decision, and not try to push them toward anything. And I just feel like we have so many good team members who are the same. But for me personally, my motivation for that and for providing at that level comes from my relationship with God and my desire to do good to I don't want to say my fellow man, but to the people that God has created. And I think that that's not a testimony that's explaining the gospel clearly per se, but I feel like it's honestly so weighty every day because I have these conversations with people about, well, what do dentistry is expensive to get done. It's like, you need a crown? Well, that's like $1,300, if you don't have insurance. And so like, do I really need this? Okay, well, let's talk through what the pros and cons are instead of just being like, yeah, you really should do it. Okay, I got to go, So
how common is it that a dentist will say, yeah, you need this, but you really don't? And I don't know if you even have knowledge in that, but
I don't know. I mean, I was just reading through some statistics the other day that the American Dental Association put out, and it's talking about how practice ownership has gone down. And there's a lot of corporate dental practices that have kind of grown up. So I feel like, if you're a dentist and you're not going to be at that particular practice for a long time, then I don't care if you're, the most moral and ethical person in the world. You love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. At a human level, it's harder to feel the weight of like, oh, and what I'm recommending and what the treatment that I'm going to do, is it going to last long for this person and do justice for them to give them a quality product? But if you're only going to be there, like, yeah, I'm probably going to move on to another place in a couple of years. Like, that's just harder to motivate yourself, I think, at a human level. And so I feel blessed to have, my own practice with my partner that we make the calls together. We're going to be here forever until we retire. We're not going anywhere. And so, but within dentistry, a lot of people are hopping around more. And so I think it's harder to have a long-term relationship with a provider that you can trust, that you can build that relationship over time.
And their reputation's on the line.
Yeah.
Right. It's almost like the first thing that comes to mind is pastors, right? Yeah. Jumping around. And that's why MacArthur was so special, because how long was he at Grace Community? Like 50 years or something like that? Over 50 years.
Right.
And he always jokes that he jokes about the challenge of preaching to the same people every Sunday because they heard last week, and he has to make sure that he's not losing them on saying the same thing over and using the same sermon. But I think that also applies for you guys, or for the dentists, is you got to stand by your work.
Yeah.
Right. And is there a common kind of procedure that you'll see more of that, where short-term fixes are implemented, like a filling or a crown or something like that?
There are different just opinions in general. You can have a couple really good dentists who just kind of see things differently. That's different than, just like in any business where you have someone kind of taking advantage of you and saying like, well, you need all this expensive stuff. You can have someone come work on your HVAC and try to oversell you, So, but you can have differences, like even between me and my dad, he would do something, I'd be like, I might have done that a little differently, but neither's right or wrong. But in terms of so to your question, it can happen across any of those things. You know what I mean? I've always tried to make sure that we don't have any kind of like upsell type of aspects within like our systems. There's really, we don't really sell like a lot of products.
Buy one filling, get another one free.
Yeah, sure.
Get a filling, get a crown for 50% off.
I think the one decision, and I guess it's an ongoing decision, but a decision that I made before looking for a partner when my dad was going to retire was, okay, do I change the whole format? So we've been a primarily insurance-driven practice. I don't know what percentage, maybe at least 80% of our patients are insured. Okay. So, we have like, 40, 50% write-offs on everything we do. Now that's just part of medical care, right? That's part of healthcare. Write-offs are a part of the deal now. But, there was an opportunity there, I think, when he was going to retire, where I could have said, hey, you know what? This would be so much easier for me if I just dropped all the insurance plans and just said, hey, if you really like me, come see me. You're going to have to pay cash, but you're going to get something really quality. And that would have simplified so much of the business. I mean, we have 4 people that work in our kind of front office, reception / administration / accounting that spend a lot of time with dealing with insurance claims, filing for appeals, or just errors that, honestly, we can make at times, or the insurance company can make. And we just want to make sure people get as much out of their insurance as possible, so they don't, they can pay less out of pocket. We're trying to do that as much as we can. And I could have distilled everything down to kind of a cash practice type of thing. And that is becoming more and more popular because it's kind of honestly less stressful. Yeah. Because there's less weeds. And practically more money too. But I just enjoyed over the years, my family, extended family, friends, church, and then all the people that they kindly say nice things about us, bring people in. We've had a lot of people from the homeschool community come. Just getting to interact with all those people literally every day, either have a friend or a church member or a family member come in. It's great. So that was a decision, that kind of somewhat passively made because I just said no to that, to changing up the whole practice format. And it just gives me opportunities, I think, more opportunities. We kind of have to have a bigger team because of that. And so, for instance, 2 Fridays ago, we were able to do a donated dental day. I don't know if you're familiar with local ministry Mission Southside. There was 3 pastors at Olathe Bible Church. Now it's called Journey, I think. But one of them was my youth pastor when we used to go there. And he and a couple of those other guys, they started this ministry in Olathe. And it's very much focused on, they try to find specific apartment complexes that they know it's a very low socioeconomic situation there. And they go in with the mindset of let's meet their needs. And then for the people who respond and want to have, relationships, let's then meet their need for hope. So they provide help, and then they provide hope, and the hope in the form of starting Bible studies, going through the gospel. And so we've been partnering with them for a while, where they go through and invite different people from the apartment complexes that they're ministering at. They may partner with a church or something. Like our church, Countryside, has, a handful of people who are partnering with Mission Southside, and they work at a specific apartment site. And so they're going there basically every week. They're either going there and they're just walking around and praying, or they're meeting with specific people. They're providing a need because Mission Southside has established a huge kind of draw of donations too, not just money, but physical things, bicycles, furniture, clothing, and everything, you name it. So I've just been impressed by their kind of, I don't want to say strategy, but their design to get the gospel to people, but start by meeting their needs. If you just kind of go around and just say, hey, who wants to have a Bible study?
I'm hungry. I need to eat first.
Yeah. There's so many needs to be met, and they've just done a good job of going to a place where there's real need, And so I've just enjoyed partnering with them over the years. They go through their apartment complexes and they bring in a bunch of people who have dental needs. And so Friday, a couple Fridays ago, we had as many of our team members that could be there. We just tried to get through as many people as we possibly could. And we kind of designed it a little bit after the times when we've gone down to Mexico. So our church has a pretty cool concept. You're familiar with it, where the missionaries that we support, our church supports 100%. So we've got missionaries in Brazil and Mexico. And that way, when those families come back, they can just hang out with us. They don't have to travel around the country and raise all new supporting and everything. It's that part's already done every year when we do our budget and stuff. And so we started going down to Mexico. Actually, I take that back. My dad did a trip down to Brazil, I think, probably over 20 years ago. And he had done a trip to Guatemala before that. So he kind of set the pattern again. But then when I got out of school, we started going to Mexico. So we got about 5 times. And after about 3 times, it's like, man, we got this down. This is great. Like, we had problems getting equipment down there the first few times because like TSA would like take away some of the equipment we were trying to get down there. And
because you're giving dental services.
Dental services. Yeah. So we try to take like specialized, what we thought were TSA approved air compressors, and they would get confiscated. And some of our, little knickknacks that go along with some of our instruments and tools would get confiscated, and we get down there and then try to buy up what we needed. And we kind of figured out the stuff that was really tricky to get through, airport security and whatnot, and just ended up buying all that stuff down there and just leaving it down there. And as the church grew, Pastor Brian Warren and his wife Danielle, as their church grew and they were able to kind of get a couple buildings built up, little small ones, now they're able to store some of those things in there for us. And, so, we had a little gap where we didn't go for a while over COVID. We bought tickets and everything. We tried to go, but, it didn't work out. And then I don't remember the last time we went, but more recently I was trying to get down to Brazil with a dental team. And, Pastor Roger Johansson, his wife, are down there. And Pastor Roger inquired with the local government about it just to be, formal and everything, and they were like, no, you can't do that because we don't want to deal with your toxic dental waste. So I'm trying to remember how long ago that was, but I think I was going to ask Pastor Roger if is there somebody new in charge down there they can ask, like, don't you want some free dental care? I mean, maybe we can take it more interior. They've got a ministry that's further interior because they're on the coast down there. Aracaju is on the coast. They moved there like 2 or 3 years ago after they'd already established like a broad ministry in Maceió for a little further north. But yeah, man, those trips are so awesome. We just see God provide. I got to take 2 of my kids last time, which was really awesome for them to see, work out in the mission field and just help, treat people's teeth. And so.
What's the most common mistake people make with their teeth, and how can they correct it?
Everybody knows to brush and floss. But I'd say over the last 2 or 3 years, I've been pushing a little water flossing.
I just started that back up, and it's for the gum health. Because is it because you get food stuck in between your tooth and gum, and then it starts to become inflamed and whatever, and then that becomes like really bad, right? Yeah,
in your mouth, it's chemistry. It's the chemistry of your saliva and the food that you eat and the bacteria that's just the normal flora. You got chemistry. Did I say chemistry? Bacteria. The bacteria that are the normal flora. You got bacteria in your skin, inside your gut. Yeah. You got it in your mouth too. And so when you eat something, well, they're going to eat too. So they're going to eat whatever you eat. And if it's very sugary, they're going to eat a lot of it and produce a lot of byproducts, and their byproducts are acidic. So the more acidic the environment is in your mouth, that's what makes enamel break down. The enamel is that outer lining of your tooth, right? Which is amazing. I mean, when you kind of think about all the machines that humans have made, and like the longevity of some of those machines isn't that good, but like God has made like a set of, there's a cartoon that calls them mouth stones, but a set of these bones kind of, if you will, that for most people, if they're not, really genetically predisposed to horrible things, work for their whole life. If they take decent care of them, it's amazing that this can last when it's exposed to so many things. And so water flossing, I think, is the next level up. To me, it's like that is now the modern form of home dental or teeth care, teeth and gum care. For 10 years ago, people were kind of picturing like, oh, you stick this thing in your mouth and it goes around all your teeth at the same time and it brushes them all at once and it only has to be in there for 10 seconds. It's like, and people are still trying to make those. Yeah. And maybe someone will make one that finally works and it just lets you spend less time doing it. But we just noticed that all the patients who we have who started using a water flosser, and Water Pick is kind of the main brand that everybody knows, man, it's noticeable. They look
basically
healthier.
It's just shooting water.
It's just shooting water. There's nothing
to get
really
food out.
Magical about
right?
it. Yeah.
Get food out of between the tooth and the gum.
Yeah, but if anybody who's done it knows this, It's great if you have a white sink like this, because you can brush and floss as a test and then use your water flosser, and you do it kind of leaning over the sink because water's just coming out of your mouth, or you can do it in the shower. And you see all the little particles that are falling into the sink.
Yeah, I just started.
Oh, I didn't get any of that when I brushed and flossed.
That's right.
And flossing is always like, oh man, nobody ever flosses. And that's, if people just flossed, everything would be so much better in their mouth. And it's way better than nothing. It's way better than not doing something in between your teeth. But most of the time, it's literally just passing through whatever gunk is there and passing back through it.
Just stays there.
And you have disturbed the bacterial environment there, which may kind of help. And we know flossing works to some level, but man, water flossing in terms of just, ridding those really tiny areas of bacteria that are more harmful, because the bacteria that are deeper in your gums or more hidden in kind of in between the teeth actually produce like stronger forms of inflammation. They're the anaerobics, or non-oxygen loving. The bacteria that kind of float around open, those, they need oxygen. Oxygen goes right your mouth, and it's in the sticky, environment in your mouth. But deep down in the pockets around your gums or in between your teeth, those are the anaerobic bacteria, and those create more of an inflammatory reaction from us. So when people are losing bone around their teeth, that's called periodontitis. And that happens more rapidly from our own inflammatory response.
Is the bacteria eating the tooth?
No. The bacteria is present, but if it's highly active, or it's our body's reaction to it. Now I'm talking about the bone around your teeth, not your enamel.
Yeah.
That's one thing. That's a whole category. Getting cavities, that's a tooth being eaten away, right? But your bone around your teeth being eaten away is actually a higher, statistically, more people lose their teeth from that than from cavities and such. So periodontal disease, which is gum-related health.
Is it connected to heart disease?
Oh yeah, there's a correlation. But there's not a causation established in the literature.
How is it correlated? I'm trying to understand the connection.
Well, just from the aspect of like anything that's in you eventually kind of gets into your bloodstream, and then you can find it in other places. It gets stuck, in different places. And I'm dumbing it way down, but it's the same reason why if you ever have a joint replaced, like a knee or a shoulder, you have an artificial joint, then when you come to get your teeth cleaned, you take an antibiotic 1 hour prior to that, because the bacteria in your mouth are going to because you kind of disturb things, and usually people bleed a little bit, then bacteria is going to get in your bloodstream and could supposedly get down and get on that joint and cause an infection in that joint. It's never happened. There's no record of it actually happening, but in the medical community, there's this mindset of like things get in the bloodstream and it could be bad, So there's not these causations per se. There's correlations, and so some precautions are taken because of it.
Because the mouth can be the direct kind of door to the bloodstream, which is why people get so addicted, like nicotine and all these other things, because it goes straight to the bloodstream instantly.
Yes, so you have that sublingual right under the tongue is a very rapid absorption into the bloodstream. So that's exactly what you're talking about. And I think probably the more accurate way of describing the fact that people who lose their teeth also have heart diseases is it's just, that person's general approach to their health is probably on the lower level. They're not taking care of their body. They're not taking good care of their mouth. And those two things seem to go together. So that's kind of that correlation aspect that you see.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I've read that xylitol is good to use as like mouthwash, because I do.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yes. So xylitol is a sweetener that does not. So when I talked about bacteria in your mouth eating the same thing you eat, well, they love sugar, and they eat that up really fast and produce a lot of acidic byproducts. Well, they don't really metabolize xylitol that well. So they won't produce a bunch of acidic byproducts when you have xylitol in your mouth. So there's been a lot of xylitol products that have come out in the last few years. There's like xylitol sprays.
I do gum.
Me too.
Xylitol gum.
Yeah. So I've been chewing xylitol gum for a long time. Man, this this one brand just went out of business. It's called Glee Gum.
I've heard of them.
Yeah, I've been buying it in bulk.
There's one I use called, I think it's called Joy.
Okay.
And I think they're about out too, out of business.
Well, I think
guys, come on, buy it up so they can stay in business.
I don't know if it was COVID initially, but I think the tariffs actually ended up shutting them down, honestly, because I got a few emails. I would say like, guys, why isn't this in stock? Because I literally buy cans of it. You know,
Me too.
I buy enough to get the free shipping, you know what I mean?
Me too.
So I buy like 5 cans of, they're little chiclet looking things.
Yeah.
And now, man, I don't know what I'm going to do.
That's hilarious.
Because I like to chew xylitol gum if I have a snack in the afternoon. And
does it get the food out of the teeth? That's what I feel.
I wouldn't call it that. I would just say that acidic environment that tends to happen, like if you have something sugary, or especially if you have something acidic, like you drink a Coke, well, it's just acidity. Coke's very acidic. I mean, you can clean off batteries with it, right? So the xylitol reduces how much that bacteria in your mouth is going to produce more acid. So
it kind of balances it out.
Yeah, there's a lot of xylitol products that have come out. I think it's probably just been slapped into a lot of different things, but I think it's good. I think there's things that show how it affects saliva consistency. And if you want to get into that whole category, the quality of your saliva along with the quantity of your saliva actually has a huge impact on things as well. So you tend to get the type or strain of the particular bacteria that live in your mouth from one of your parents because they kiss on you when you're a baby. That's at least the theory. But it's the quality and quantity of your saliva that you have so like some people, man, they take really good care of their teeth, but they still get cavities no matter how hard they try.
Why is that?
Because they have terrible saliva.
That's why.
Yeah, because their saliva is not good at neutralizing that acidic environment.
And there's nothing you can do about that?
Man, the whole, that whole industry of, oral healthcare products has been attempting to make a decent saliva replacement for years. And it's so difficult. It's one of those things that we can't quite copy God with that. And there are products, but no one thinks they're that great.
Yeah.
But
do they try to attempt that with xylitol? Because I was looking it up the other day and it said dry mouth, like you take it for dry mouth.
Okay, so that's where this topic leads into. So most people, whether it's when they're younger, they might be taking a simple medication like, hey, I've got a little anxiety. My doctor gave me this medication. It could be an SSRI or something like that, which, has its whole, barrel of issues too. But that affects your saliva chemistry.
Do you dry mouth?
Well, dry mouth is called xerostomia, okay? And when you look at the side effects, a whole host of drugs, I want to say the majority of drugs, but I don't have a statistic to back that up. But a lot of drugs that are commonly taken have xerostomia or dry mouth as a side effect. So you take these drugs, you feel like this is necessary for me, and so, but your saliva quality is so heavily impacted by that. And what happens is these people, they take really good care of their mouth, but then they start this certain medication, it affects their saliva chemistry, and they start getting cavities. And that's why too, we probably do, you would think like, well, I get enough cavities filled and I get enough crowns on my teeth. There's not really that much left to do to my teeth. But what happens is, the older that you are, the more medications you usually end up needing, and the worse your saliva gets as a product of that. You have dry mouth that you deal with. You're waking up at night and your mouth feels dry. It feels terrible. I mean, I have some patients who just they're dry as a bone in their mouth. It's like torture. I mean, they'll drink water, sip water all day long, and it still never feels like their mouth is lubricated. It's very trying. Most of us have felt a moment of dry mouth, but for it to go on for days, weeks, months, years, it's very difficult. So there are some of those like rinses you can do. And some of the little things you can suck on or maybe have xylitol in it as well. You're sucking on it so that you might produce a little extra saliva, and the xylitol is there to kind of just, that's good too, sort of thing. Xylitol is a sweetener. So
tastes good.
Yeah. So, that's a whole area of medicine I wish that was, I don't like to act like I'm smarter than anybody, but I wish the medical community was a little more aware of these side effects when they prescribe a medication. I hope it's really needed. I hope it's not just like, well, this will probably help you. Just try this. It affects more than just whatever that drug is meant for. It has side effects. So
where are you guys located?
We're in Olathe.
Cross streets?
129th and Merlin.
Okay. And
Yep.
and you're taking new patients?
Always, yeah. I mean, that's kind of like I said, our practice is meant to just be open. And my dad was always like that. And I don't know that we'll ever get busy enough to turn anybody away. But I'm super blessed that we have a lot of people.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah. So, yeah.
No. So what's your website?
That's a good question, because we're working on getting it changed since my partner came along and she has a different last name than me.
Yeah,
but
I'll put it in the description. I think
it's still bucherdental.com. We're trying to get it changed because her last name is Withart. So our partnership is Bucher and Withart Family Dentistry, but
I recently went there and
the URL is.
I had the most thorough cleaning I've ever experienced in my entire life. Because a lot of times they'll do it and you walk away, you don't even feel like anything changed in your teeth. But I had some stains, whether from coffee or fruit, and I was like, there's no way they're going to get these out. My teeth were so white.
Awesome.
So I'm like, I'm coming back. But if you're looking for a place that's solid and does a really good job, then check them out. But as we wrap this up, thank you so much, sir, for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for the discussion. Appreciate it.